Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this D-Zone virtual roundtable. We've just released our latest trend report, the Modern DevOps Lifecycle, Shifting CI/CD and Application Architectures, which you can download right now today on dzone.com. While DevOps is here to stay, as the years pass, we have to continuously assess and seek improvements to our existing software processes, systems, culture, and DevOps is no exception to that rule. With business needs and customer demands constantly shifting, so must our technology, mindsets, and architecture in order to keep pace. We are excited to be discussing these topics with you today. If you find our conversation today valuable, you want to share it with others, you can head on over to dzone.com/events and see all of our on-demand content. So before we get started, as you can see, we have a distinguished panel of experts that I would love to introduce. My name's Jesse, Chief Technologist here at D-Zone and moderator for today's discussion. So first up, Justin, wave Justin, software engineer at IBM. Thank you so much for writing Integrating Software Supply Chains and DevOps. We have Christoph from Red Hat, Principal Product Manager of Developer Tools. Brian Valunga, founder and CEO of Doppler. Boris Zykin, lead solution architect, Cloud Astro, a CAB member of D-Zone. Welcome back, Boris. Ray Ellentini, solution architect at Soltech, also a repeat. So Justin, Ray, and Boris have been on these before. We're excited to have you guys back. Brian and Christoph, a huge welcome to both of you. Now, we're going to talk a lot about research and we're going to talk a lot about statistics, but let's take a little bit bigger view of the market in general. DevOps is growing, right? It's significantly growing, projected at 25% annually between now and 2032. Faster software delivery, you're going to see that in the report, higher quality, all of this stuff is top of mind for executives, developers, and we're going to deal with it every single day. Automation is huge. And platform engineering is starting to, weave its way in there as a strategic topic, with 80% of software engineering organizations saying that they're going to build platforms for these reusable services, components, and tools for application delivery by 2026. So as we kick off the conversation, I want to really talk about the benefits and the barriers of CI/CD with a focus on the reasons why developers and organizations adopt this process, right? So if you look at our report, and we're going to start looking at these metrics, we ask the question, what do you believe are the top reasons for adopting continuous delivery? Rank in order of most important to the least important. Here is what the report says. Number one, increased speed of feature delivery, right? Now that's been number one for, 2022 as well, right? And 2023, shortened development cycles, which was number two in 23 and 22, and then improved developer team and flow productivity, which is up from number 4 last year. What are your initial thoughts on these rankings? Do you agree, disagree, and why? And Justin, you're ready to go. So let's start with you, bud.
Yeah, I do agree with that. And I think it's kind of interesting to see that number one stays number one, because from a software delivery standpoint, our goal when we're writing software, as much as we enjoy all the processes and the parts that go into it, is to deliver something to a customer or a user, right? That's at the end of the day, that's our job. And anything that drives that faster, that helps us improve that. So that number two and that number three kind of play into that. But number three is pretty interesting to me because it kind of gets discounted how much doing CI/CD drives how a developer thinks about their work, or how they're able to, even down to the coding level, how they change how they write their code. So I find that's interesting that one made 3 this year.
Yeah, it's up from number 4. That's fascinating. All right, Christoph, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with the 2 first points. I think they are intertwined. One goes with the other. For the developer productivity point, I think I will kind of disagree with that one. I think the continuous delivery is not enough, because that would be just focusing on one part of the outer loop, where you can do a lot from the inner loop. So there is you can do a lot more for that. So I think that's not just with the continuous delivery.
Interesting perspective.
You mentioned a bit platform engineering. There is a lot to be done on that space.
Yeah, and we're going to get to that in a few minutes. All right, Brian, CEO, right, from the executive level. Do you agree with these?
I do. I think that number one is an outcome of number two and number three in my mind, right? So if like you have shortened delivery cycles and you have better productivity, and also I think one other thing that's missing here is confidence, right? Like if I have confidence that the code that I'm going to write with all the abstraction layers and infrastructure in place, that it's just going to get delivered on time in a timely manner, and I don't have to go debug production to get this thing out and live, then I'm going to be able to ship features a lot faster. And so for me, number one is the primary outcome here, and two and three are inputs to that allow you to achieve number one.
Okay. And not a lot of change, right? Were you surprised that there was no change, or you think this is going to be it for going forward for a while?
I wouldn't expect any changes for a long while. At least until maybe AI comes in and radically shifts things up a bit. But until then, I think it makes pretty good sense where the rankings are.
Yeah, AI is another huge push into this. I don't know that we've had a single conversation in the last year where we haven't talked about AI a little bit. And Ray, I want to throw you a little bit of curveball. As we talk about these first two, we always want speed, right? But what about quality, right? Do you think number three is a way to kind of inch quality? Do you see people being concerned with that, or is it still just speed and short development cycles?
Well, it depends, I think, on how you look at it. When I have a discussion with folks on this topic, it's kind of like the iron triangle software development, right? Quality's baked into the flow, right? And so so you've got to have a decent, amount of coverage, covering your riskier areas, maybe your more fragile areas. Nobody ever has perfect unit testing, and integration testing coverage. And, I tell people, we're not typically, enterprise application, you're not building an airplane, you're not building a spaceship. So we can be, hit the unit testing level to the point that the business and everybody feels comfortable, but it's baked into the process.
Okay. And Boris, anything you want to add in here, especially around how maybe your motivations where you are for adopting CD, and do you see this play out where you're at?
Basically, I agree with everyone for sure. But first things first, we need to define what exactly you mean about CI/CD, because in many organizations, they using this CI/CD, but they have their own definition. So what is exactly, for some organization, CI/CD is just a simple pipeline somewhere like a code. For another organization, CI/CD is like a platform team. So and that way, if we are thinking that CI/CD is just a pipeline, is not enough for sure. But the future comes to the platform engineering mostly. Yeah.
Okay, so two for pipeline versus platform and platform engineering, which y'all have seen in there. We'll get to in just a minute. But I agree, it's continuously shifting, right? I mean, I remember back in the day in the 90s where we had build engineers who just manually built stuff on multiple platforms, and it took 4 days to build our stuff. That's like insane when I tell people nowadays, right? But we covered a little bit of the motivations, right, and benefits for adopting continuous delivery and stuff. I want to talk about how hard it is to get in. Like, what are the barriers to entry, right? If we're saying that adoption's smooth, we want to make sure that we're also real candid about the challenges, right? So in the survey, we asked this question: what do you believe are your organization's main barriers to adopting continuous delivery? Right? Number one was automated tests are too brittle or too permissive. It's 39%. That was number one last year. Number two, corporate culture, 38%. So that's up from number three to number two. And then number three, our dev teams lack the right skill sets, 35%. And that's down from number two. So number two and three switched from 2023. A lot of stuff to unpack here, especially with the shift of culture to three to test. Yeah, everybody's shaking their head. So the first question is always to get a sanity check. What's your take on the number one barrier, right? Do you still think that those tests, which is why we kind of led into this with Ray a minute ago, are too brittle or permissive? Do you think that's still number one? and we'll just do a quick around the room, and then we'll talk to it a little bit. Justin, what do you think?
I think it's still one of the most important. I don't know if it's number one still, in the sense that it depends on the product you're working on, right? If you're doing a small application, it's pretty straightforward to get a good unit test suite in there. If you're doing a very large enterprise application, like Ray mentioned, it's going to be a matter of, you're not going to get 100% coverage. You're going to have to pick what places are the most critical and target those. So sometimes it's a matter of just shifting perspective. That, like, you wouldn't approach it from a, how do I get 100% coverage? You would approach it to, how do I get the kind of like 80-20 rule? How do I get the maximum coverage at the points where I need that coverage?
That's a good word. All right, Boris.
Well, I think now it's yes, I totally agree with you, because now it's a lot of organization fighting for numbers like 70% coverage, 90%, but nobody is talking about the effectivity of this coverage. So what they're doing. Also, I think culture come into the play, because a lot of companies still they a little bit old-minded in that way. So you need to teach them, need to explain them, and I would say skill set is now drastically grows, and everyone has a skill set, but on the management level, it's really hard to convince people, because some people, yeah, they are a little bit old-minded in that way. So that's the main blocker, kind of.
I love it. Honest. Ray.
Yeah, so I, one, and then maybe draw a little nuance in terms of definition, right? So we've got continuous delivery versus continuous deployment, right? And continuous delivery, I think you can be a little bit more lax. We'll talk about deployment in a little bit here, but and hitting the testing and stuff like that. So I do agree, though, that that maybe number one isn't as critical as it used to be, as much as to me it's culture, and it's called corporate culture. It's for those that have been around for a while, the DevOps wall of confusion, and just getting multiple departments to talk to each other and coordinate with one another, and kind of put the fiefdoms aside and say, ultimately, we're here to deliver a product for our business, whatever that product happens to be. And it's a culture. I think culture, to me, is one of the biggest issues that I see in terms of getting a good, clean pipeline in place.
Interesting. Okay. Christoph, what do you think? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, definitively the automated tests are like number one thing. I agree with that. Usually what I see from large enterprises, and especially with large applications, they have just zero tests. They have not a single one. So this will prevent them to do any automation, especially going to production. So there is a long way to go. Brian was mentioning AI earlier. I think there is potential for them to generate some tests at scale, because I've been doing some scoping on such applications, and we're not talking about just hundreds or thousands of tests. It's like over 100,000 tests to write, which is you cannot catch up on like 20 years of code from a specific app. So if you're in that case, then yeah, you still hope that you can do some automation at some point. Otherwise, in more recent development teams, we are talking about developer productivity and then pushing features to production faster. So teams are going to have to cut on a few things, and usually test documentation are taking a hit. So that's not necessarily what the best practice will recommend, but they have to do some cuts. And
yeah, Brian.
Yeah, I think number two should be actually all three of them. And here's going to be a hot take why. I think you can break up company culture into two parts. The history of the company culture, right? So like all the decisions it's come to the point of now, right? So if it didn't have a strong culture around this, then you're not going to hire engineers that have a strong skill set around this. You're not going to build tests around this. You're not going to obsess over this. And then separately, when you do want to make the change, you need to have a company culture and a management team that has strong enough willpower to actually manifest all the changes that need to happen to actually get to the point where you can execute on this and see the gains. And so for me, company culture and I guess maybe engineering philosophy are like the two things that are like the inputs that get all of these other outputs. And if you don't have those and you don't have enough conviction behind them, then you're not really going to be able to achieve the results that you're looking for here. And so I think company culture and engineering philosophy are everything. And then how much willpower do you have to overcome any bad decisions made in history that you now have to deal with? Because as Christoph said, if you have a very large code base and you need to write 120,000 tests, you're going to need to have enough willpower to figure out how to solve that problem. It may not be manual. There may need to be some automation to like AI or whatever to build those tests, but you're going to need to have a lot of willpower there, especially when their bosses are coming to them and saying, hey, is this the highest priority thing to do? And you got to say, yes, it is. For these reasons why. So I strongly believe company culture and engineering philosophy are actually the main things that there.
Brian coming in with Peter Drucker, ladies and gentlemen. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. I love it. It's so true though, right? I mean, it goes back to what Boris was kind of tiptoeing around a little bit, but yeah, a lot of these are caused from that problem. So it's no surprise to see that it inched up one, right? And right to your part, I would not be surprised if it inched up again. I think as culture becomes more, it becomes more prevalent as a discussion topic, right? And not as taboo. I think, you get good management in there and good leadership that pushes that stuff down. To Christoph's point, how do you solve a 200,000 test deficit, right? We need 200,000 tests written. Whenever you put that forward to a leadership team, they think we have to hire 100 people, or we can, really put our minds together and find a better way to do it. I love that. Awesome. Thank you. All right. So a little bit more about number 2 and 3. Do you have, and Boris, maybe we can talk about this one to you, since you said you weren't surprised about seeing the skill sets go down because, we're learning more. Is there a success story, or tell us a little bit about how you and your team are able to improve skill sets?
Well, yes, there are a lot of stories actually about this, and almost every project we have the knowledge sharing with our colleagues from the big companies, something like that. And yeah, I mean, it was one story that we have to build like the whole platform like for the company and deliver them in the end as that not only the CI/CD process and project, but also some infrastructure as the code. So they were quite happy. Moreover, a lot of companies with the big labels, they have their own framework to that you as a company can implement this like the foundation or landing zone, which includes all the steps how to properly teach your customers and the company that you're working for. That's a huge topic now.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, making sure that everyone's constantly learning all the time, creating a culture of learning within your organizations for every project. I love it. Now I want to switch gears to automation. And Christoph he's been hinting at this one like the whole time, so I love it. I'm gonna let you lead off. But right, we talked about limitations of automated tests, right? It's a huge barrier. And as we look at how automation can affect deployments overall, we asked a question. Right? Do your organization's deployments to production require any manual steps? Right? And this is not just test automation, but automation of anything in the pipeline, right? And 72% said yes. So now we know we're lacking in automation. There's always things we can do. And then as a follow-up for anyone who said yes, which of the following require manual intervention, right? When sending out to prod? Deploying to production itself, 71%. Deploying just to staging, 42%, and then regression tests, 32%. So, Christoph, from where you sit, what do you make of deploying to production as the number one, with 71% of respondents saying yes? Does this match up with what you see and what you hear?
Unfortunately, yes. I'm not surprised at all by this number. Yeah. Actually, I will be even surprised that it's not higher. I'm working with large enterprises and regulated environments. So usually they have to follow like the segregation of duties. Someone who codes cannot deploy automatically to production. They will have to get someone else to do it, or like some kind of manual process. Maybe most of the pipeline can be automated to some kind of staging environment, but the promotion, the last push to production will have an extra step. So depending of maybe the definition of deploying to production, you will have always something like to do manually. So that's going to be something very hard to change. And you have other type of application that's still running on bare metal. So you have to keep having a DBA, you know, like an administrator and someone to still do everything manually. It's becoming more rare, but it still does exist. It's still happening.
Yeah,
So,
cost is real. I know a company that's running on bare metal just because of cost, right? I mean, it makes sense. But yeah, really, really quick around the room, raise your hand if you have manual steps deploying to production. All right, raise it. Okay. All right. All right.
I would say
So-
it's mostly to stuff off dovetail Christoph said, it mostly due to regulatory requirements.
Okay.
In separation of concerns, and, you know, in terms of who's responsible for what.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. All right, Brian, so y'all are automated then. Brian, on your end.
Yeah, we're fully automated end to end. We've invested pretty rigorously in automation, making sure not only that we can deploy in a fully automated fashion, but also if we ever have like outages, we can switch over to another cluster very quickly and route traffic to like fallbacks or fallback infrastructure. One thing that actually really spoke to me on this around deploying production, and so I'm mainly coming from the lens of startups and mid-market companies. That's really the surface area that I have to see.
Sure.
And usually with those kind of companies, they have a very rigorous pursuit of automating the entire delivery process. They aren't big enough to like be burdened by regulation, so like they're all on the focus of shipping really quickly and removing as much of the manual steps as possible from a developer's plate. And the one thing that we consistently see across the board that slows them down is actually something almost never talked about, which I would love for people, for everyone in the industry to start talking about more, which is secrets, right? When you think about it from a code perspective, right? I write some code, I push it to a branch, pull request, push it into the main branch, and then a whole DevOps flow gets kicked off to automate that all the way to production. But secrets don't have any of that right now. And so like a developer adds a secret, then they have to figure out how to get that into production. And 9 out of 10 times, they don't even have access to production. So that goes into some insecure ticket somewhere in Jira system or wherever. And then some other leader comes at a different time and takes that and copy and paste that into production or some other workflow similar to that. And the problem with that whole thing is the code that requires that secret is being deployed in an automated fashion, right? It's just going out the second that request is approved, but the secret isn't. The secret is still manually has to get added in, and that creates an outage. And now you have human intervention coming in and saying, okay, production's down. We got to go figure out why. And then the DevOps leader has to go figure out which developer created that secret and where is it? How did they get access to it? Because they don't have access to the Stripe or Twilio account or wherever. And so that whole system is broken. I think that is, at least for mid-market and startups, and I would say fast-growing mid-markets eventually becoming large enterprises.
Yeah.
We have a handful of. That is really one of the things that dramatically slows down their ability to automate the entire life cycle.
Absolutely. And so it's interesting. So that's mid-market. Justin, though, is large enterprise. So, and Ray, I saw you put your head in your hands there for a second, so I'll get to you. But Justin, I want to hear from you first from the IBM perspective.
Right. So I just have a little caveat why I said that we are fully automated for deployment. It's just a nature of how we provide it to our customer. Usually the customer does their deployment. It's manual. Any type of testing we do, we usually do it as an automated deployment. So internally for us, yes, we're automated. But from a customer perspective, they pick up this artifact and they have to manually deploy it into whatever their hypervisor environment is. So that's just kind of like a caveat. Even at that point, there's a gap there between us and the customer. It's kind of like a baton handoff. But as far as the large enterprises go, it depends on the product you're on. And a lot of times, from a large enterprise perspective, people get caught up in the idea of all or nothing, as opposed to if you break down the problem into, say, you have 5 parts of your product and they're all very large, pick the smallest one and start with that one and just get those gears greased and get that company culture to recognize that there is a benefit there to doing this.
Okay. And Ray, I want to go back to you. Don't want to lose that that moment that you have talking about secrets and moving things around and manual deployments. You know, what is it that you wanted to respond as Brian was talking?
Well, so from Brian, both at Christoph, so it's secrets and some and database stuff, right? So they're similar in challenge in issues, and so in teams that I work with, we try to bake that in at the laptop, you know, so secrets are deployed, you know, because we deploy local, we have Kubernetes running locally, so that when you deploy, you're deploying your secrets, you're deploying your database scripts. Is it perfect? No, but it helps alleviate some of that that stress that you know chicken egg thing problem that you have when you get down the line with some of these more critical items. Like this, the two to me are database and secrets as well. So I would agree with that.
Oh yeah. All right, Boris, and then Boris, and then Brian.
Yeah, I wanted to mention also that it's kind of like a chicken and egg problem, because even some famous providers and cloud providers that not allow you physically automate all initial step of deployment. So you have to do it manually by any chance that even if you have frameworks, landing zone, whatever, you are stuck with this problem that basically comes from provider itself.
Okay, Brian.
One other thing I'll just add there, Ray, because I think you're totally spot on. Like, you got to treat this from local development all the way up to production. Is a lot of times it's like the workflow is the thing that's breaking. It's like, yeah, you have it in local development and you have it in production, but how do you get that new production secret into production, or how do you get that dev secret into the hands of every developer that needs it, right? If you're on a team of 20 or 50 or even 100 developers, how do you make sure every single one of them have it? And that workflowing part is actually, I think, a lot of times the thing that breaks, right? And it makes sense. We had the exact same problems with code, which is why we built up these like DevOps and GitOps strategies and philosophies, but we just haven't done that yet in secrets.
Okay. All right. Well, great conversation. I'm going to push us on to our next topic on software delivery practices, techniques, metrics, of everything that's out there, right? And this can play into our conversation too. One of the biggest things what we talk about is like cost, right? Cost optimization, right? We're talking about SaaS. I don't know if any of y'all have ever been hit with an Amazon bill that was like 10 grand more than you thought it should be because some developer didn't spend something down. Whatever. I'm not bitter. But it's a large focus area, right, for all of us. So in the survey, we asked which of the following practices and techniques does your organization use to manage and optimize costs? Number one, automation of manual processes, 60%. CI/CD, number two, at 58%. And then three, containerization. Any surprises in here for you guys? And if there are, let us know why. And then what recommendations do you have for how organizations can optimize costs? You know, something specific for those out there watching us today. And we'll start with Ray. Haven't started with you yet.
Yeah, thanks. So, you know, I think this kind of dovetails with some of the previous topics as well in terms of the developer experience, or developer now is dropping down perhaps a notch. I think the tools are catching up to the DevOps world. You know, so we run Kubernetes locally. That was really, you know, you weren't doing that a few years ago. We're big into dev containers. All the IDEs support it now. So now you deploy in your development environment, it's actually inside the cluster. And so what it makes is an easier ramp up time for the engineers to get on board, because they don't have to understand all the intricacies because they're working in their IDE. So for me, containerization is huge. That can be done with a lot of things other than Kubernetes, of course. The automation of manual processes, once again, starts in the laptop and goes all the way back up. So I agree with all three of these, but for me, making the developers more efficient is about reducing cost. No, not really. It's about creating more at the same cost, which is, you know, really saying the same kind of thing.
Okay. All right, Brian, what do you think?
I think for me, the question is, where is the vast majority of the costs coming from, right? So if you're on a company, if you're at a company that has a very large infrastructure stack, right? Like imagine you're OpenAI, where you're dealing with like petabytes of data a day or more. Well, then the costs are always going to be there. It's not going to be an engineering headcount versus for a small startup, it'll probably actually be inverted. I know for us, we spend far more on R&D than we will ever do on server costs. And so I think that's the first question that we have to answer. I think containerization should probably be number one in my mind, because like that's where I think consistency, like if you aren't containerizing, then you're going to get inconsistent environments, and that creates a massive amount of headache for engineers that just want to be shipping features, going back to the things we've talked about earlier. And that's obviously for like a company where R&D is the biggest cost center. If it's on the actual like infrastructure itself, then I would say it's probably none of these, and completely separate set of things that you could do to streamline costs. And I'm sure we can go into that in great detail if you want. But that's kind of like my view. It's like, really, what are the size of the companies we're talking about, and where's the main cost coming from?
Yeah, it's a great point. And Justin, we'll go to you, and then I would love to go deeper, but we're not. I want to switch to platform engineering with Christoph after we get Justin's take on this one.
Yeah, I'm definitely with Brian. It's funny that as engineers, we'll always do testing before we optimize and figure out what to optimize, right? You don't want to prematurely optimize. But for some reason, when it gets to cost at like a company level, we just guess at what we think is the highest cost thing, instead of looking at, my server cost is through the roof, but I'm targeting headcount on the engineering side, right? But from just experience, usually what it ends up being is companies will try to take the whole bite in one shot instead of taking a incremental step towards it. So let's say you want to get to a place where you have CI/CD capability a year from now, if that's your goal. Doing a handful of unit tests or putting in unit tests for all the new stuff you create is a good like on-ramp there, right? You're looking way out ahead. You're not trying to take this in one giant jump. And then same thing goes for, picking a small piece of the product and just focusing on that and making that your CI/CD pipeline and starting to grow it from there.
Good word. All right. So I do want to switch because we're going to run out of time for our target. But as the last topic, I want to get to something that we referenced earlier in our discussion that we've seen kind of emerge in the DevOps space since we did our last trend report, and that's platform engineering. So this idea, this discipline involving designing, building, maintaining the infrastructure and tools for efficient software development, deployment, operations, that idea of the platform instead of a pipeline that we talked about earlier. So we asked a question that I'd like y'all's take on as we start to wrap up. But in the survey, we had select the top 3 areas in which your company uses or plans to use platform engineering for software development delivery in the next 12 months, so in the next year. Number 1, automate dev test and prod environment config. That's 42%. Streamline our CI/CD pipelines to automate build, test, and deploy processes. And then number 3, provide and standardize dev tooling and environment. So 42% for number 1, 39% and 31%. So, and Christoph, we'll start with you, but do you and your teams focus on platform engineering or even have a platform engineering team? And if yes, how do you leverage them? Right?
Yes, so definitively at Red Hat, we invest heavily in platform engineering. We do have teams. We actually even released a product called the Developer Hub earlier this year. It's based on Backstage.io, so it's like pretty popular to do like internal developer portals. And definitively with that, we are providing lots of like templates or self-service for the developers or anybody in the IT organization. So that's a very good way to either start a new application, create pipelines, even migrate applications or provision on like environments, like the infrastructure, like the clusters and everything else. So that team will be really tweaking those capabilities for the developers, and with all the security, all the like regulation that it will need for the specific organization. And the developer, that will be just a one-click button, put some information about the app or infrastructure, like just a name or some quotas. And the rest will be entirely automated and baked in. So the developer won't have to really know the tools, even like about containers, where the app is hosted, that could be on a VM or the cloud. And they would just care about the features and the application itself. So that's a pretty cool tool.
Awesome.
I can see the trend to go with platform engineering.
Yeah. Does anybody else have dedicated platform engineering teams yet? Moving that direction? Yep. Okay. Boris, real quick, before I get to the last question, any quick recommendations for someone who's starting in the early stages of platform engineering?
So the maybe checklist for this. It will be go to the definition of the platform. Read what is the what means platform and what is different from CI CD, and that's it. So basically, that's the problem. But in general, it means like a separate team that provides you automated framework for your infrastructure and GitOps and everything ops in your organization. Even cost can be part of this platform engineering. So that's the main recommendation.
Awesome. All right. So last question. Once around the team, your number one prediction over the next year. Where do you think DevOps, CI/CD, platform engineering, everyone's got an idea of what they think is next. What's your one prediction on the direction that you think that all of this is going to go? And Justin, I'm going to start with you.
It's funny you start with me. I'm usually pretty bad at timing or guessing stuff in the future. So I'll just say this. I can't tell you what the number one thing is going to be, but platform engineering is definitely going to be a main driver. And I think as we start to get towards getting out to like a continuous development and continuous delivery set of goals, getting all these different pieces to integrate with one another. Because for a lot of years, we've had different parts of it incrementally get there, but starting to get this to almost like from a development standpoint, a full stack look at getting your code checked in to getting it delivered to your customer. I think that's going to become a bigger issue.
Okay. Awesome. Christoph, your one prediction.
Yes, I'm obviously biased on this one, but I will say platform engineering will grow exponentially in the next 2 years. It's not going to transform anything. They're just going to make things better and provide like self-service for the developers.
Awesome.
But I think one thing that will be also added to it, that would be security that will be baked in. That's something usually we tend to forget. So that could be from all aspects, from either detecting like malicious code or like scanned images, and even at runtime. So everything can be fully automated, and that's just easier with platform engineering because that team will be taking care of that.
Awesome. Good stuff. Boris.
I think in the next year or maybe years, it will be became more like a platform engineering, and maybe pops up something like platform as the product when you are delegating all your platform deployment and to some company which provides you a framework and a documentation and everything in this, and then you became and received the whole platform as the product. So that's I already see it happening right now. So
okay, awesome. All right, Brian, what you think?
I would say I'm bad at timing, but I would say decent at predicting.
Okay, come on.
So for me, it's like I think every couple of years we see a new cycle of abstraction. So like platform engineering is like the next layer of abstraction. And I think probably what we're going to see is that AI agents are going to get embedded into these platform engineering products and platforms. And we're really going to be we're going to shift it from how to do this to what the business outcome is, or what is the engineering outcome. And that's really what we're going to be thinking about from now on, probably in a couple of years. So maybe not at the end of this year, and then the AI agent will basically work with the platform, or the platform ops product, and basically platform the rest of the infrastructure. And so I think that's really what we're going to see is a vast amount of automation where we shift our thinking to outcomes.
That's very cool. All right, Ray, wrap us up, man.
Yeah, so I agree with all of these topics, and I think the one thing that Justin brings up is something near and dear to my heart. Is just a more cohesive process where we're getting better. I think the answers here, given the fact that they haven't changed much, demonstrates maturity in the field. We're kind of settling in, right? So what's next is a continued maturity, getting the tools to be more cohesive and less independent from each other. And of course, the AI stuff, it's coming and it sounds cool. But I think just keep the tooling going and getting the engineers and all the way up, the engineers all the way through operations, working on a cohesive set of tools and technologies.
That is awesome. So that is it. We're out of time and maybe a little over, but great conversation. Thank you all for being so engaged today and diving headfirst into the modern DevOps lifecycle. Thank you to everyone out there for tuning in. I trust you're leaving with some good advice, whether it's platform engineering or how to build your tests with AI, improve your culture, the maturity and the cohesiveness of your team and your tools. I hope you are taking something away for improving your own operations, no matter what it is. A huge double thank you to all of you for being on the panel today. Thank you for such great conversations, insights, best practices, and for sharing. Your willingness to participate has helped companies gain valuable insights into making their own DevOps functions better. For those of you out there, you can download this trend report, the Modern DevOps Lifecycle, at dzone.com. And again, if you want to share this roundtable or view any other on-demand events, you can visit dzone.com/events. But don't leave us just yet. Stay for just one more minute. We're always looking to improve, right? So help us by sticking around and filling out a quick survey. Thanks. We'll see you next time.